Hey folks, Mr. Justin here with Secret Weapon Miniatures and a 2-minute tutorial. Today I'm going to look at 3 different textures we can get out of our weathering pigments so that folks can see there's not just one way to do it. First thing I'm going to do is turn on the lights. We're going to get started. In this case, super simple. Wait for that to come back up for us. What I have today is my Rust Red Pigment. Anybody who's taken one of my hands-on with pigments classes ought to recognize this guy, the base I always use for that class, or at least typically. So, texture. One of the things we can get from pigment that we can't get from paint alone is wonderful texture. So in this case, I'm going to start with a smooth texture. I'm going to take my Rust Red Pigment. I'm going to brush it very heavily over this pipe section here. Come over there so I'm not blocking myself from the camera here. So you can see this is a very smooth, very fine texture. It's getting down to the recesses, so you can see that some of the scratches sculpted into the top of the pipe here are more visible. But it's a soft, 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 soft texture. The other thing we can do is stipple pigment in place. And it's going to create a combination of those textures. So I'm stippling, 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 stippling. So you can see I'm putting some of the pigment, crushing it a little finer as I go. So you can see it's a combination of rough and fine. May not be quite visible enough, so I'm going to pull out some of my dark yellow here. And I'm going to go over the red so that you can see a little more clearly. So there you can see I've got a combination now of fine and semi-rough texture on the top. I'm going to tap this off real quick so that I don't have to worry about that excess texture. The other texture I can get, and I'm actually going to pull out the 2 colors that are best for this, is a rough texture. One of my favorite things to do with a rough texture is obviously you can do mud, you can do old dirt that way, dried mud and dried dirt especially. But one of my favorite effects here is ash. And to get ash, what I'm going to do is take some of my white pigment, sprinkle it into an area, white on white, not going to be terribly visible, realize. Take my black, sprinkle that over the top. Clean off my brush, obviously, before I go back into the white. Sprinkle in some more white. Sprinkle in some more black. What you'll find very quickly is you have a very rough texture that makes a fine ash. So all those little particles, all the little balls of dirt that make up pigment are just sitting there. So in this case, what I can do is now come back with my pigment fixer. Very carefully let capillary action suck into that pigment. In fact, here, I'll show you that. We've got time in our 2-minute tutorial here. Let's pop out some pigment fixer. Secret Weapon Pigment Fixer is all I've got here. Alright, and a soft brush. So I'm going to let capillary action take care of this. That means that it's going to suck it off of the brush. I'm not going to try and push it around. So I've loaded up the brush with Pigment Fixer, and I'm going to get in here where you can see it and let it flow off of the brush. You can see how the pigment is soaking it up, pulls it right off of the brush for me. So when that dries, it's going to lock that rough texture down. Same thing over the top here. Now when you apply the pigment fixer, when you apply your thinners, it's going to disguise a lot of that color as it absorbs the liquid. So remember to be careful. Don't go back and over apply. It's easy when you see the color disappear to think, oh no, I washed it off, I better apply more. Wait for it to dry completely before you add any more pigment. Otherwise you might be surprised later by how much extra color you got, more than you wanted. Anyhow, that's our 2-minute tutorial. You've got a soft texture, a mixed texture where it's somewhat fine, somewhat coarse, and then a completely coarse texture. The difference between brushing heavily, stippling, and sprinkling. So load up your brush, sprinkle, 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 sprinkle. In this case, load up your brush, stipple, 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 so you're getting a combination of that fine and coarse texture. And here, if you rub it really hard with the brush, you're going to get a very soft, fine texture. So that's it. That's Texture with Pigments. Any questions, you know where to find me. It's Mr. Justin at secretweaponminiatures.com, and I'll be back with another 2-minute tutorial.